I did an okay job. And that's gonna have to do. Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. So today we're actually going to be doing something I'm quite excited for, and that is to make this dress. Right. But you might be wondering, Kat, how are we going to make this dress? You're wearing it. Well, so here's the story. This dress I made in 2018 and it was my very first vintage pattern make. I bought the pattern, I think at a thrift, like a second-hand shop. I want to say in Brighton, maybe? It was very much an impulse purchase. I hadn't really considered doing vintage patterns before, but I really liked the look of the dress on the envelope. So I decided to make it. I went shopping. I didn't really know, I think at the point I knew a bit more about what materials to use for historical makes than for an actual day dress, a dress that I intended to wear on my day to day. So I picked this blue, I think this was a rayon, with some cute little flowers. It's nice, it's nice. It's a really nice dress. It's absolutely one of my favourite dresses in my wardrobe. But it does have a few issues, and for that I am going to take it off to show you. Okay, so here's the dress. Doesn't look like much when it's flat, but it was really lovely when worn. So the first mistake I made with this dress is that I lined it. Now, 2018 was 4 years ago, and I can't account for my thought process then, but I just thought dresses were lined. That's just how they were made. But that's actually not true. I've since realised that these sort of mid-century dresses were not lined, and it was more expected that you'd wear a slip or something underneath. So my problem here is that although the fabric itself, the outer fabric, is really drapey, flowy, lightweight, the lining that it shows is your basic polyacetate lining, which means as soon as it's slightly warm, I get so sticky and sweaty in this dress. It's actually quite gross. The second mistake I made was that I did not pre-wash my fabric, and I mean the rayon, because I didn't know about it at the time. It's not something I started doing until after this, because this was my lesson. This was my dress lesson. I didn't pre-wash it, and then when I washed the dress the first time it shrunk, and it shrunk everywhere. So I lost about, I think it was about 1.5 inches in the hem, so I just re-hemmed it and re-shortened the lining. But I couldn't do anything about what I lost in the width here, so this dress is a lot tighter than it was when I first made it, which makes it a bit more uncomfortable to wear, which I'm sad about because I do love this dress. Otherwise, you know, I did my best. It's not a bad dress. The finishing is a little questionable. Like, I never sewed the collar down at the back because I didn't really understand the instructions, so I just left it. Whatever, it's worked. I've had it for 4 years and I've worn it and washed it and it's fine. So whatever. My point is, we're now into a hot summer. I'm hopefully going back to Portugal soon, and I wanted to take some cute dresses to wear that would be lightweight and flattering, but also really nice. And also my colour palette has changed. So I bought fabric for this, and this is the fabric I bought. It's mustard yellow, can you tell? But it's lovely, it's absolutely lovely. I bought it online. I'm so happy with it, and the first thing I did when it arrived was I pre-washed it. So mistakes were learned, guys, mistakes were learned. And then the last thing we have to cover really quickly, I'm never really quick, am I, is the pattern. So this is the actual pattern for it. This is a Batik vintage pattern. I believe I looked it up in the vintage patterns wiki, and it was from the 40s. It's pattern 6099, it's size 14 in a 32 bust. So we're actually just going to go straight into cutting, because I have, so from the other pattern, the original dress I made, I copied out, traced the bodice pattern and altered it, because obviously I'm not a 32-inch bust, I am a 38-inch bust. And yeah, we're just going to go straight into cutting, because there's some fiddly stuff in this pattern that I can't wait to tell you guys about. So I just wanted to talk you really quickly through the pattern and what comes in the envelope, because it's really cute and no one else gets to see it. So if you're new to vintage patterns, this is what they look like. They're made of this really thin, lightweight tissue paper, and they don't come with lines or anything. They come in one size, and they usually have perforations like this, which tell you which pattern pieces it is, and there's also other perforations. This is all labeled in the instructions so you know what they mean. And then this came in the pattern, which I thought was so sweet. It's an old ad for silk sewing thread, but they do it by just giving you sewing hints on how to sew a trim scallop. I just thought it was so nice. Okay, but let's talk about the actual pattern. This pattern has a lot of pattern pieces for such a simple dress because there are some fiddly bits. So, first let's go over the bodice. This is a very simple 1940s shape. If you can't find this pattern, you should be able to draft your own, hopefully without too much hassle. And I'm just going to show you what the pattern looks like. So the pattern is basically a rectangle. Oh, wait. So the pattern is basically a rectangle with a sloped shoulder, and your shoulder actually ends here and the pattern extends a couple of inches beyond your shoulder. There is one bust dart, quite low sloped, and that's literally it. And a small neck hole. That's it. It's a very simple shape. And then for the back, it's the same. So there's a neck hole there, which is smaller than the front. There's a sloped shoulder that extends past your shoulder seam, straight down, straight across the waist. That's cut on the fold. And then there's one dart to take in the back a little bit. That's it. And then we have the skirt, which just looks like this, very simple. So this is just the skirt. It's like a quarter circle, basically. Well, between a quarter circle and half a circle. And that's it. So let's get to cutting. Okay, so the instructions, because yes, we are actually following the instructions. They're very cute, very nice diagrams and stuff. The first step is to sew the darts. So I will show you now, I have basted my darts. First I marked them, basted them, and then just sewed them by machine, pressed them really well. So there's one bust dart on each of the fronts and there's two waist darts at the back. The next step is actually to apply some interfacing to the front neckline here, which is what I'm going to do. And then interfacing. Yeah, apply the interfacing. I'm just using fusible interfacing because that's what I have, but it's woven, which I prefer over the papery kind. And then so the front seam, the shoulder seams. This one's really easy. And then we start on the collar. I'm going to come back to you for the collar because it is a little tricky. So the collar is in. The way they have you do this is actually really clever because you sew down the neckline facing, which finishes the neckline. That's my iron, sorry. And the collar in one go. So the way you do it is the collar is made up of two pieces. One of them is interfaced. You sew it together, right sides together, along the long edge and the short edge of the sides. Then you turn it inside out and press really nicely. Then you baste it right sides together over the front of the bodice, and then you clip into the seam allowance and then only baste it to the bodice, the back bit of the collar, not the front. Then you pin on the facing right sides together over the top bit. You sew that all by machine. And then you turn it so that the facing isn't on the inside. You iron everything down, and then you finish the back of the collar by hand by turning under the seam allowance. It's actually a really clever, and actually once you know what you have to do, it's not that hard to do. It was just that I could not figure it out for that first dress. So here we are, quite a clever and neat finish. So the next step is actually to sew up the side seams. One of them is only a couple of inches long because you need to leave it open for a zipper. And that should take all of 3 or 5 minutes. And then the next step is actually to finish the armholes. So the armholes are just the side bits that are left open here. And the way they recommend you do that is by making like a little binding or facing or something, and then sewing it to the right side together, pulling it to the inside and hand sewing it down. That's actually a really neat little finish. So I'm going to cut out some seam finish, binding, whatever, from this fabric from scraps and do that as well. And that'll be it for the bodice. So actually the instructions tell you to start with the skirt, but because I have to leave the skirt up to hang for 24 hours or maybe a bit longer, because the skirt is partially cut on the bias, it will stretch and warp, and so I'll need to let it stretch as much as it wants, trim back that warp, and then I can tackle the skirt. So that will be tomorrow. Hello. So you might think it is the next day. You might think that it's the next day because I said I would do it the next day and it would be a really quick and simple project. However, it is in fact a week later. So the day after I finished the work on the bodice, I actually tested positive for a very common ailment that has been going around the globe. Again. I had a really rough time of it for a few days, so I wasn't really able to do anything. And today is the first day that I'm back on this dress, and you might think, wow, Kat, you probably should rest. I mean, you know, it's a pretty serious disease, whatever. And to that I tell you, no, because I am going on holiday soon, now that I've tested negative. And I would like to wear this dress on my holiday, so we're finishing it. Just wanted to show you the state of the bodice as it stands. It's so cute! Look at it! Something that I do want to mention about the bodice that they don't mention in the pattern is that, so in the pattern they want you to hang the skirt overnight because it's partially cut on the bias and it could stretch and warp. The bodice front and front is also cut on the bias, so this is actually cut completely on the bias, and they don't tell you to watch out for any of that. But what I've noticed consistently with the other dress and in a fitting I did a while ago is that this bit right here at the centre front, so this is the centre front seam here, that is on the bias, this bit stretches and warps while you sew. So I would just say before you sew on the skirt, just double check that that's still the length you want it to be. That's just a top tip in case you do cut these sort of 40s bodices on the bias. So today all we have to do is the skirt. And I say, oh, it is pretty complicated. Well, it's not pretty complicated, it's just you need to do some accurate sewing, some accurate machine sewing, which I'm not great at. That's one of the reasons that was such a big mistake on my original dress, was that I messed up the pockets and then I couldn't be bothered to fix them. Whatever. So the first step for that is to lay the skirt on the floor and compare it to the pattern to see where it has warped the hem. So I'll just trim that back. Then I need to sew the centre fronts and the centre backs together. And I wanted to take this moment as well to mention seam finishing, because you might have noticed in my earlier clips that at some point I pulled out the overlocker. Gives you a really neat finish. I don't use the overlocker very much because obviously I prefer historical methods or whatever. And it's not usually a finish that I like to see, but I think it looks really nice on this dress. I think it's the black that goes with the fabric. They actually give you 2 suggestions for seam finishing on the pattern instructions. One of them is pinking and the other one is edge stitching. Now, I decided to do neither because my fabric is not really tightly woven enough that I think pinking would be a long-lasting finish, and edge stitching just seemed way too flimsy in this kind of, you know, so edge stitching is when you fold the seam allowance under and then you top stitch it down basically. I couldn't, it's just such a flimsy fabric that I really didn't want to, you know, hate myself. So instead I just thought another very common finish for this kind of time period is to zigzag or to zigzag your edges, and overlocking is basically a more complex version of that. So I was happy to go with this. But the real point of this dress is not to be a historically accurate 50s, 40s dress. This is to be a pretty dress that I can wear in my wardrobe and that will last me a few years. So that's the whole point of it. The other thing I wanted to mention is that obviously with a lightweight fabric like this, my first thought was to do French seams, but I did French seams on my original and I actually found that they wore through because it's such a light fabric. They actually wore through quite quickly. And I also found that it was really hard to line up certain things like the facings and the pockets with seams that aren't pressed open, because that's how the pattern is made. So just a top tip, I guess, maybe I always thought French seams were the solution to everything. They're not. So let's get to the skirt before I dawdle on anymore. Let's sew. Okay, so this is the tricky pocket bit, so I thought I'd talk you through it because sometimes saying things out loud will help me do it right the first time. So the first step for the pockets is to actually sew one side of the pocket bag to the back of the skirt, which I have already done here. You have to leave the left hand side open above the markings so that you can put a zipper in. Then you get these nifty little welts, which are super cute, and then you have to baste these on, and then you put on the other pocket, the other side of the pocket, over it. I've lost my pockets. Over it, and then you stitch that, so that will secure this down. And then you have to sew the side seams by doing them sort of up to the marking of the pocket and then around the pocket, and this gets the pocket like all in one go, I guess. So let's see, let's go really slow, basically, I think, is how this is going to go. But then at the end, there'll be like a really cute pocket welt right there. Let's go. Okay, so here's the pocket situation. You have to leave the left hand side open so that you can put a zipper in. But otherwise, this is what it looks like, and you can't even see me. And then you just got like these little pocket welts here and then a pocket on either side. So the trickiest bit is matching up all these bits here. I did an okay job and that's gonna have to do. It's fine, no one's ever gonna notice that, and you know what, I don't care at this point. So the next step that they tell you to do is to add a stay. Now they give you a pattern for the stay, which is just a long thin rectangle, and they tell you to cut it out of seam binding. I don't have seam binding. I think the purpose of this is just to stabilize the waist so that it doesn't warp or stretch or whatever. So instead what I'm going to use is I have this linen tape, which is very lightweight, very thin, but very sturdy. And then I think you just slap on the bodice. I'm pretty sure that's what it says. And then it just says, add the zipper according to instructions. Okay. Again, this is like a little bit of tricky sewing, but once you kind of just take your time and baste, I think is the best advice I can give. So let's get to it. Okay, so the dress is finished. So we have one zipper, shoddily put in because that's just how I do zippers. I have no advice for this except iron. If you're using an invisible zipper, iron open the teeth before you do it. Works for me. And then I quickly did the hem. So first I put it on my dress form and I leveled it out because it had yet again warped. And then I sewed on 1 inch wide bias tape, turn it to the inside and did a little heartbone stitch to secure it down. I like doing this. I've done this on a couple of skirts before and I like it because it gives the hem a little bit more weight and it's also a really nice clean finish. And the dress is done, so I think we should try it on. So here we are. Sorry, there's still nowhere in this room to get a full length shot, but I think it's adorable. It's super comfortable and I think very flattering. Yeah, kind of. So I think this is very flattering. But wait, I have a surprise for you. So 2 dresses are the same, but it's not enough. So I actually made an extra one hiding under here. Under my mock-up for a different project, we have another dress of the same pattern. And I guess we should try that one on too, right? And on that surprise note, I think we should wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching. I had a blast. It was so nice to like sort of sit down and do one project start to finish in like a couple of days. It's a really simple kind of project and I hope it shows that vintage patterns don't have to be intimidating. That, you know, the instructions can be a little intimidating, but you can figure them out for sure. I'd like to take a moment to thank all my top tiered patrons, Lourdes, Alexa and Melly. Thank you so much for your support. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, I'll leave a link here. I'll be posting more photos of the dresses worn and I might scan my altered bodice. I don't know how vintage copyright works, so I don't know, we'll see. But check it out there if you're interested. If there's enough interest, let me know and I'll see you all in the next video.